file, new, and now, hey, look at that, Android application. I'll do that. So here we're going to be creating our first Android application, just a test, so I'm just going to use test. So that's the application name, and then the project name. I'll keep it the same for now. Package name, I'm going to name it com.wilsonmedia.test, because they basically, for your package name, they want you to take your URL and basically reverse it. So whatever your domain name is, let's say you had a domain name wilsonmedia.com for the internet, you'd switch that to be com.wilsonmedia and then whatever your project name is after that. And that basically gives you kind of a structure or a hierarchy. When you look at all the apps that are installed on your device, it sorts them first by com or biz or net or whatever, and then the name of the company, so that all of your applications will be grouped together by company. So I'm going to select Google APIs, API level 8, which is the Android 2.2. And then I'm going to say the minimum required SDK is going to be 8, 2.2. And then create custom icon, sure. Mark this as a library, no, this is an executable. And then create project workspace, create project in workspace, yes, and this is fine. So here it allows you to create custom icons. Basically, you've got this LDPI, MDPI, HDPI, and XHDPI. LDPI stands for low resolution dots per inch. So that's your low res icon for screens that have low resolution. For screens that are medium resolution, medium DPI, it'll be a little bigger. High DPI is going to have more high definition, and then extra high DPI for those extra high resolution screens that are now coming out these days. So I'm going to choose from their predefined list. I'm going to just choose that one, why not? And then kind of set this up a little bit like that. Square, sure, why not? And then background color, I'm going to make this blue. Ooh, that's ugly. Let's go green like that. Sure, why not? And obviously, if you're going to be making a serious application, you could spend more time on that. This is just a test. So create the initial activity. I'm just going to do blank activity. If you want to do this master detail flow, this is what it will look like, but it requires at least API level 11, and we're on 8. So I'm not really interested in that. I kind of like this way better, so I'm going to hit next. The name of the main activity. The way this works basically is you've got an activity is equivalent to a form in Visual Studio. So when you start up, say, a WinForms application, then you're going to have a starting form called main or something like that, and this is the same way. It says I'm going to create a form by activity, or an activity by default, and we're going to call it main. The layout, which is an XML file that defines what the interface will look like, we're going to call that activity_main by default, which is fine. And if you want to have your own little, naming conventions, whatever, that's fine. You have different navigation types. None is the default, which is supported by all versions. Tabs requires at least the SDK 14. Tab swipe, swipe and title, or drop down. And keep in mind, it is possible to do tabs and tab swipes and other things with lower versions of the API like 8. You just have to be a little bit more creative about how you set up your layout and how you use controls, like tab controls and things like that. Hierarchy parent, don't really need one. At this point, title, main activity, whatever, that's fine. So we hit finish, and it creates our project for us. I wanted to show you what it would look like by default when you first got into it. So in here, what I wanted to do was take a look at the layout of your project. You have a source folder, which is where all of your source code goes, and you can see in here, here's the main activity which was created for us by default under our namespace, which we specified com.wilsonmedia.text, and underneath this form, kind of like the code behind, is our class, and this is our main activity class. And then underneath your class, these are all the different elements, the different methods, the different properties, and so forth, so you can kind of see how the hierarchy works. Gen, you don't ever want to touch. This is automatically generated for you every time you build your project, so don't ever touch anything in here. These are the includes or libraries that you're referenced for your project. It automatically puts in the ones that you need. Here's your Google Maps for your API, your default Android, and then here's your dependencies. And these are put in automatically, so you don't need to mess with these. If you wanted to, you could add a third-party library or something like that in here to give you extra functionality, but by default, if you open this up, the Android.jar has like everything under the sun that you could ever need. Here's your Android functionality, here's your Dalvik and your Java. So all of your Java I/O, your Java Net, all your Java functionality is already included for you, so you don't need to go out and include any Java libraries. And then you've got Apache and XML and all kinds of other things. So by default, you have a lot of functionality at your fingertips. Assets is a blank folder that you could put things in there if you wanted to put like a video file or whatever. You could. Your bin directory is where everything is compiled to, so you don't need to mess with that. Libs is where your libraries go. You could put third-party libraries in there if you wanted to. And then your resources go in here. And this resource file and the source file are your two big folders that you're going to be messing with the most. Your source code goes up here, and all of your images, your layout files, your menu files, your string resources, everything is going to go down here. So if you have custom styles to be applied to the interface, you put them under styles. If you have strings, say you're using localization and you want to put strings of different values, you put them in there. Your layout is what you're going to be using to define what the interface looks like, and that goes in there. And I'll open those up and show those to you real quick. Activity main, we'll look at the front end. I'll just minimize this stuff out of the way. Okay, so when you hit this button here, zoom to 100%. So this is what your form looks like. By default, it's just a blank form with a test title and a text control in here called Hello World. And something to keep in mind, I mentioned earlier that what are essentially forms in Visual Studio are called activities in Java. And likewise, what we call controls in Visual Studio are called views. So this is a text view, which is actually a text control. And if we wanted to add, say, a button, you could just drag a button onto here and drop it, and there's your button. And that is a button view. If we wanted to put a check box on there, we could. If we wanted to put a little, spinner activity indicator on there, we could. Whatever. So it's a drag and drop interface similar to Visual Studio. Drop your controls on there, and off you go. So for this, we're just going to leave a button on here and a hello world.